Today, we're kicking off things with a topic that's been making headlines and sparking intense conversations across Nigeria and beyond, the Minimum Wage Act. Now, in recent times, the Nigerian President Bola Tinubu signed into law the Minimum Wage Act, which effectively raised the minimum wage from 30,000 naira to 70,000 naira. You've seen the tweets and announcements and the agitations, and you probably have questions. What does this mean for Nigerian workers? Does this wage apply to everyone? What happens if employers don't comply? How was this new figure reached? How does the concept of minimum wage work globally? Well, that's exactly why we're here. Today, we're going to untangle the real story behind minimum wage, not just in Nigeria, but looking at how this critical issue plays out around the world. What's fact? What's fiction? By the end of this episode, you'll be armed with the knowledge to understand this complex issue and form your own informed opinions based on the facts. Let's untangle the Minimum Wage Act. Welcome back. We've been joined by a legal professional, a lawyer in equity, talking about Hamirah Oluwatosin to break down this issue. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's good to have you. So I believe you've already heard some of the questions I already planned to ask from my introduction there, which is what a lot of people are concerned about. So let's start with the basics. How does the Minimum Wage Act work? What is the start of the matter?
I would like to first of all start with the minimum wage, the meaning itself. Minimum wage is the base or the lowest amount of money, salary or wages that an employer of labor can pay to his employees. This only applies to contract of employment and not, let's say, contract work or freelance and the likes.
All right. Going by that, what would you say are the major changes that we're seeing in this new iteration of the Minimum Wage Act?
Yes. Initially, I think the general knowledge is that the minimum wage has now been increased finally from 30,000 naira to 70,000 naira. It is worth to note that initially in Nigeria in 1981, the minimum wage was 125 naira. Although when we compare it to the economic, when we compare it to the situation, yes, many years ago, it's quite different. Now, the average Nigerian cannot sustain himself with the minimum wage alone. But we still have to acknowledge the fact that this is a progress, and we really hope that in the next coming years that there will be more improvement along the line.
Indeed, I think what you said there also goes to mind to show that even though the price might increase numerically, it might not be the same in terms of economically the value of the currency in question.
Exactly.
So what goes into determining the amount that the federal government usually ends up with and it becomes signed into law?
Usually, it's usually a cross-sectoral issue, and it involves a lot of stakeholders coming together. Like we know that the current National Minimum Wage Act 2024 was born out of the frustration of Nigerians, of the average worker not being able to meet up with his basic needs when we compare it with what he's earning per month. So this is why the labor union went on strike then, and it was from then that there was a negotiation and a kind of convergence between the Labour Congress and the federal government. The Labour Congress was initially proposing 615,000 naira because they tried to ensure that their own perspective is that the salary should be able to at least afford you a decent lifestyle. You shouldn't be wallowing in poverty. And federal government, as of last year, was proposing 60,000 naira. But eventually, they came to a conclusion, a compromise, I would say, and which is why we have the 70,000 naira that we do today. But the silver lining is that the review period has now been reduced from 5 years previously in the 2019 Act 3 years. So in 2027, we'll be having a different conversation, and we really hope that by then there'll be more. The increments won't just be based on the numerical aspects. It should also be with regards to the purchasing power. How can this wage actually help you to live a decent life and help you to achieve your highest potential?
One key fact I can already highlight there. Whoever is watching now already knows that by 2027, they should be expecting another review of the Minimum Wage Act. So let's start. You've already touched on it a little, because we want to educate people so they know what's going on here. Around the time that the act was passed, I wouldn't want to mention names, but some prominent or a prominent person in government, made a statement like, even your gatesman, your house help, you must pay them now. So the question is, let's either affirm or debunk that. Who does minimum wage actually apply to?
Okay. I think the best way I would explain is to actually talk about the people, the set of category of people that the act does not apply to.
Right.
So then you know that anybody outside of this bracket automatically is entitled to the new national minimum wage. So first of all, the act covers any worker who provides a particular service to his employer, any form of employment, whether implied or express, as long as it is not on a part-time basis or a contract basis, or if it doesn't, as long as it is not a seasonal employment. When we talk about seasonal employment, we're talking about like people working in the agriculture sector, like farmers who work maybe based on seasons, and people that are hired for that. And we also have people working in the tourist industries, who work when there's like during peak tourist seasons. And also the act does not apply to people working on aircrafts and also vessels like merchant shipping. The reason why it doesn't apply to these particular two categories is because they have their own distinct laws. So there's civil aviation law and there's also shipping laws. So they are not actually considered. And also it's worthy to know that any establishment, if I'm an employer and I have less than 25 employees, the act automatically does not apply to me. And I think the wisdom behind this is so that the small and medium enterprises can have the opportunity to grow without having too much on their plates. So the act applies to anyone, any worker, any employee who is in a valid employment, whether it is impliedly written in a contract or expressly. So that's just it.
All right, so people who have just 4 persons, 5 persons in their, they don't have to worry about that.
And to your question, yes, it also includes drivers and maids. That is
if the 25 people or employees threshold is crossed, right?
No, that is when we talk about a business in sense of, but if you are working as a maid or a laborer, it includes manual, all this like manual laborers, it even includes cleric, even cleaners. If you have, for instance, in a company where, as you said, if we are talking about a business setup, yes, of course, the 25 threshold will apply. But if you hire somebody, maybe your home, you hire someone and
you want them to just carry
do
out
something for you. You definitely have to.
All right, fair enough. I think in this instance, it sort of answers the question. If you have a cleaner or a driver, but your business is under that certain number, it really still doesn't apply to you.
Yes.
But that's the middle line there. So that statement, I guess, has been cleared. So I guess other questions is, are there penalties? What happens when somebody is found wanting? You have over 25 persons in your organization. You've met all the requirements. They are full staff. They are in proper employment. They are not seasonal workers. And for some reason, you choose not to pay them the minimum wage. What is the penalty for that? It's
actually a criminal offense for you not to pay your employees. And so if you as an employer, let me not say you as an employer, but if an employer is unable to pay his employees or is just willfully deciding not to pay them, then the employee can approach the Ministry of Labor and Employment, because there's this particular department, they call them authorized officers, whose their role is to investigate cases like this, when cases of unfair labor practices. So when you as an employee, for instance, find out that you are not being given your dues, which is the national minimum wage, you can always seek redress. And it doesn't always just have to be through criminal route. It can also be civil. You can go to the court and seek compensation. So you can, as an employer, the penalty that you pay fine, and the fine, and even all the arrears that you've been defaulting on, you have to pay that employee.
That's a separate, so you have to pay a fine and then pay what you're owing the person.
Definitely, yeah.
So are there other things that maybe persons who find themselves in that situation can do? You're saying they can approach those the organization, the courts, and all of that.
Ministry of, yes.
So it's not something where you go to a police station and say, I'm due minimum wage and I haven't been paid.
Well, that's well, I think when you approach the police, it's possible for the police to handle the matter by making it a criminal matter. Then maybe they will hire this police prosecutor to handle the case on your behalf. Because when you go through the criminal process, then it's not, in that sense, it's like the state is the one that will be going to court against the defaulting employer.
That's fair enough. So in all of this, what would you say this means in terms of how employers and employees move forward? If, let's say, you're expanding your business and the Minimum Wage Act of 2024, is it something where, I think there's a legal term for this, but it escapes my mind now. You are expanding your company. Does that mean the law now applies to you, or is it at the time of when the law was passed, till the next review, say 2027, you are, quote unquote, safe from having to implement that law in your company? Okay.
If I get you correctly, you're asking whether for someone to establish, for instance, a business today, does the Minimum Wage Act apply to him or not?
If at the moment the stipulation doesn't cover them, for instance, you started and you only have 10 employees now, and the Minimum Wage Act has been passed today.
Okay.
Is it when you expand to 30 persons?
Yes, then it becomes applicable to you, because the law would not be unfair. And the law will also not require you to then pay the fine. Yes, because that's against the principle of fair hearing and justice. So.
All right, fair enough. I think we'll go on a break now, so that when we go on the break, when we come back, we'll delve into the global aspect of this, what minimum wage means, how it compares with other nations, and so on. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, let's face it, our world today experiences numerous challenges. And guess what? Our community isn't off the hook either. Most of the world issues are either not talked about enough or never talked about at all. But here on Timeline, we've got you covered. We dive deep into issues that affect us every day, leaving behind footprints of wisdom, knowledge, and solutions. Think of it like a roadmap that keeps you on the track for success. So buckle up, because in this new season of Timeline, we're taking another trip through the past, the present, and navigate into a more promising future. Again, we're talking solutions, people. And let's make one thing clear. This is not your average blah, blah, blah convo. This is real talk with a side of inspiration and a sprinkle of wow. I never thought about it like that. I'm your host on this impactful ride. Together, we'll tackle the tough stuff, laugh a little, and find ourselves on the path to positive change. So what are you waiting for? Season 2 of Timeline will be loaded. Let's get started. Hop in, and let's drive straight into the heart of issues shaping our world. Let's go. Oh, one more thing. Hit that subscribe button and let's take this ride together.
Every day, amazing stories of hope and tenacity unfold across the globe. On Hued Hour, we dive into these inspiring tales and discuss the vital work being done in the humanitarian and development space. Humanity has never faced a shortage of challenges, yet we rise stronger through teamwork and determination. Though these remedies are often underreported, on Hued Hour, we advocate sustainable solutions. We bring you the latest and most impactful news on how lives are being changed. we engage with young change makers and experts who provide valuable insights into relief efforts and the challenges faced by local communities through a global perspective. Join us every Wednesday by 8 a.m. on Huge Network's YouTube channel as we embark on this journey of positive change. All right, welcome back. We're still untangling the issue of the Minimum Wage Act. So, Hamirah, let's talk a little bit about the economic aspect of this. How does it come to play in, how it is determined and how often changes need to be made? Give or take, there are periods of time where we had more economic stability and there's some where the turbulence sort of increases. So, how does this play into how the Minimum Wage Act is finally derived and how it should be, or it should change as time goes on?
Yes. I think one of the achievements, I would say, one of the pros or the positive aspect of this new act is the fact that it provides that review of the national minimum wage should be made every 3 years, which means by 2027, we should be expecting an amendment. And another thing I would like to say about the economic implications, I think one of the reasons why we're even having this discussion is because we know that even despite the increase, it's still not meeting up with an average Nigerian's basic needs. So I would say, or I would urge the government and other stakeholders, civil society groups, everyone to be more open, to talk more about this, problem. Because it's truly a predicament when you are working, but you can't actually benefit yourself. You cannot thrive with the money you are getting.
But when push comes to shove, there are no mechanism in place to sort of compel the government to, give what is considered a livable wage. Because the government says we don't have the money, we don't have the funds.
Yeah.
What then does happen? Is it just an issue of advocacy or protest? Are there no legal ways to ensure that this still people end up getting what they deserve?
Yes. Well, at the end of the day, it all boils down to, like I said, having everybody on deck. The 2024 National Minimum Wage Act was born out of people's frustration, and they had because of that, a compromise had to be made. We remember that prior to the 1st of July 2024, 30,000 naira was the minimum wage. So in a way, we can still say it's not that we are not improving. It's just that the pace at which we are improving is not really there. That's what I would like to say. But at the we should just, from my perspective, the solution I can see to it is making sure that all hands are on deck, every arm of government, because there are actually still some states that are yet to implement it. And like you said, what they're saying is they can't pay the workers due to financial constraints. So everybody has to, if we really follow the arms of governments, the checks and balances, which many of us learned back then in secondary school, we realized that there's a way every government can keep a check on the other. But it's because there's a misalignment here. There's a misalignment in the checks and balances due to a lot of factors that we also know. That's why we are where we are today.
All right.
Yeah.
There's a question I think is also a lot of people want to know about, which is who determines what classifies for minimum wage? I say this because an employee could argue that the work I do here is more than minimum wage. I need you to pay me way above that. I understand minimum wage applies here, but why should I be on the lowest rung? Is that something that should be determined by the employer alone, or is it something that the Act also provides for?
No, definitely. The Act allows you to be paid even more. That's why they call it the minimum wage. That's why it's the benchmark. When we go back to what the national minimum wage means, it means like the baseline of what even the lowest level of worker ought to be paid. So it means you can go higher and
So
higher.
who is determining that lowest level of worker?
Lowest level?
Yes.
Yeah, the act determines that.
What I mean is, if I keep using the example. Let's say a cleaner or a gateman, then we have some places where you have gatesmen in luxury places. Obviously, they get paid more. But I'm just wondering, is there a time where an employer can argue, okay, I know the work you do, but I have decided it's minimum wage, I can pay you here. Is that something where it's fair enough as long as you pay the minimum wage? Take, for instance, for a lawyer who's going to be hired, we've heard some lawyers arguing that this particular firm pays new lawyers this amount.
Yeah.
I've even seen cases where the amounts that were being mentioned were not minimum wage.
Yes.
And lawyers who know the law, who know the act actually, they accepted the amounts. They collect 50,000 naira, they collect 60,000 naira, some anyway. I'm not saying it's global. But the question really is about that person, that lawyer. Is it for them to say, I know my worth, minimum wage is not what I should get? Or is the employer within their rights to say, I've judged your profession, I've judged what you do, and I'm putting you on the lowest rung?
Okay. First of all, it is worthy to note that the national minimum wage applies to establishments that are 25. They have 25 employees and above. Okay. So even if it's less than that, for instance, like the law firm you mentioned, maybe if you have 5 lawyers, 10 lawyers, 24 lawyers, you can even pay 30,000. You can decide not to.
That's amazing.
Pay above it. So when we put that into, and when we talk about manual workers and laborers like drivers and cleaners, if you are working in an establishment where it's still less than 25, then you are not entitled to the minimum wage. Now to your question, whether an employer can outrightly decide that you are not worth paying above 70,000. We have to understand that we are now in a free world, a capitalist society, where you can also negotiate as an employee. You can. That's why nobody forces you to work somewhere. You have the right to apply to work in an establishment, and when you see that the pay is not worth it, then you have the right, like you can step back. And also when it comes to the employers, we have to also remember that employers are also humans. I might decide to have an establishment, okay, I really need a lot of people. I have 20, I want to use that 25 so people continue to understand and don't misunderstand. So when we have 25, let's say I have 25 employees, and I know that if I'm to pay these people more than 70,000, if I pay 80,000, I'll go broke, and I won't end up being able to pay them. And if I'm unable to pay them, these people might take me to court, or I might end up being criminally prosecuted. Obviously, I would want to stay within that baseline. So that is why we have to understand that it's not that the law just tries to make things fair, but it also gives you the room to seek more than the baseline.
I'm going to be honest with you. I think this is why some people have issue with the law sometimes, because you gave an example that just perfectly sums up the point I was trying to make. I mean, you know better than me what it takes to go through, studying law, then going through law school, the investments, the time, the expertise. Law is seen as a high profession. But then if someone opens a law firm and has 20 staff, they can actually legally say that I'm going to pay these lawyers 70,000 naira, despite the work, the expertise, all they've gone through to get to where they are. And I think that's really interesting. It's the law. I mean, we're not, it's not a moral discussion we're having here, but it's just interesting to know that that is something that can happen, and such a person would be in the clear. Because again, we see these, but then I guess on the flip side, if this law firm did exceed the 25 minimum,
or 25 to be precise,
25, 25, that means they couldn't then do that, or pardon me, they couldn't go below, at least, I guess, and I think that's some of what we're saying here. It protects the person on the lowest rung. So that aside, let's talk about globally. How does this compare to what we see on the global level? Is there something drastically different about how Nigeria goes about this, and how does the world see minimum wage as a concept?
Yeah. it's interesting when you in fact, I'll employ everyone like at their free time to also Google or make research on the various minimum wages of each country. So far, I think currently Australia has the highest when it comes to the minimum wage. It pays the employees the highest value, highest amount. If that makes sense. And we also have countries like New Zealand and New Zealand and some other countries like that. Even United Kingdom, they're doing pretty well. Germany and the likes. One thing is that what determines or what's a distinguishing factor between that makes the national minimum wage differ from country to country. It has to do with factors like inflation, economic prosperity or adversity, and also even the population. There are so many factors at play. So these are like the determining factors, and these are the determining factors. So I'll say there are just so many factors at play, and what's each country, well, bringing it back to Nigeria, where we are falling short is that we are not balancing, we are not determining our national minimum wage based on the value or based on the purchasing power or the benefit it can have to an average Nigerian. So it's not tallying with the hyperinflation. It's not really taking that into consideration. And also, when we look at it, it's like a cycle. The government also states that they are unable to pay some state governments are unable to pay the national minimum wage because their gross internal generated revenue, for instance, is not enough to pay all of the workers. So I'll say the factors at play. There are different factors at play, and this is what differentiates that makes every country's national minimum wage distinct from the other.
Fair enough. So I guess the next question now is, or let me combine them. What would you say is some of the biggest misconception that people have about minimum wage? And on the flip side, are there still other parts of the act that you want to pinpoint or highlight that people might miss, but that might turn out to be more important than they realize?
Okay. I think one of the most important is first of all, understanding what national minimum wage itself means. National minimum wage, but we've covered it to an extent. National minimum wage remains the baseline of what even the lowest worker can get. It doesn't mean that an employer or an employee cannot be paid more than this. It's just the baseline. And also, I also want people to understand that it doesn't mean that at the end of, say, every month, you must see that 70,000 naira on your payroll, that, okay, 70,000 naira. The Act also says you are entitled, every worker is entitled to 70,000 naira subject to some statutory reductions. What are the statutory reductions? Maybe when you, as a civil servant, for pension, they might be removing some amounts, or your health insurance, housing, life assurance. So all of these things are play. So it's not that when you now check your phone at the end of the month, you don't see 70,000, you now start running. You have to take into consideration some of these things because they are valid, and in a way it's like government is taking from you in order to give you back, or there's a part of your money being deducted too. So it's not the money itself that you have to see 70,000, which is why the Act also specifies and mandates it and compels employers to keep a record of all of the salaries they pay and all of the percentage, so that in case anything happens, you as an employer will also protect yourself, and the employee will also be able to validate upon investigation that, okay, I'm not being cheated. So that's why we still need a lot of awareness. We need to break it down for a lot of people. And I think some people also feel, I heard some people saying it has to, minimum national wage is 100,000. No, it's 70. What happened then was that people were proposing that it's at least be 100,000, but it's actually 70,000. And also, it's also worthy to note that there are still some states that are even paying above the national minimum wage. Lagos, for instance, being a front runner, pays 77,000, has made 77,000 naira its national minimum wage for its workers. So I think, and then when we talk about the people that are exempted, I'll just run it through very briefly. Establishments that have less than 25 employees are not bound by this act. Seasonal employees are not bound by this act. Part-time workers are not bound by this act. And also people working in civil, in aircraft. For instance, if you're an air hostess and you're watching this, it doesn't apply to you. Or if you're working on a vessel, that's merchant shipping, it doesn't apply to you because another law covers your own industry.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. When you talked about the deductibles, pension and all that, does it include tax?
No. Fortunately, thankfully, the Finance Act of 2020 makes and clearly stipulates that the national minimum wage itself, if it's the national minimum wage you're getting, is not subject to that tax deduction on the basis of that. Right. But perhaps if it's above that, then there might be.
Okay. I think another question now is when minimum wage talk comes about, people think only certain people will benefit. Now let's take it to particularly the government, federal government, state government workers. We understand that if the lowest level has been raised from 30 to 70, isn't that meant to be a corresponding raise? So let's know about that for others above minimum wage.
Yes, and this is one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest, I'll say, lacuna that we're having currently, because there has to be a ripple effect. I can't, let's say for instance, let's say level 12 worker in a federal parastatal and I'm earning, let's say 100,000 or 110,000, and then the lowest worker, let's say a driver who is also gainfully employed by the government is earning 70,000. It doesn't really encourage you because you feel, okay, you went to school, you did this, you did that, but why is mine not increasing? I also have needs, I have things to pay, I have bills to pay for. Why is it not increasing? So these are the things that also need to be looked into. But we have to understand that we are talking about the national minimum wage here, so it's not really within the ambit of the act itself to address this. So perhaps there could be maybe other acts that will be bills that might be implemented and signed into law that takes this into cognizance. Also making sure that other levels also have an increased standard of living. If
I get you, it's not the law, but it is, I think, something you should. Yes. You should. But I say it's an unspoken rule. Somebody needs to tell you that there needs to be a change now. I think I can use a specific company I once knew as an example, where the staff earn just under 100,000 naira, and the core members earn about 30,000 naira. But then they earn 20,000 naira from the company. Sorry, pardon me. They earn, the normal 30,000 naira from the government as core members. Okay. And then they earn 20,000 naira from the company as like a salary as well. So when the minimum wage act comes into play, they now get 70,000 naira, 77,000 naira from the government, plus the 20,000 naira, and the core members and the staff are now earning pretty much the same thing. It feels
pretty unfair.
Yeah, I think, again, it's something that the law doesn't compel you this time, but I believe you do need to take that into account. So thank you so much for coming and helping us break down minimum wage and debunk some of the issues thereabout. Thank you so much, Hamirah. Yeah. All right, that's how we end the program for today. I do hope you've learned some lessons here about how the Minimum Wage Act works and how it compares with other countries and, the key aspects there, who is involved. So you can know now if it applies to you, if, you should be looking to do that as an employer, and so many other angles to consider. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. See you next time. I am Amadine Ubewe. Bye for now.